Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making time on a Thursday. It's a beautiful day, so I'm really excited for our conversation and for conversations to continue outside. Hopefully, maybe with some drinks. We'll see. So today we're going to be having conversations about Muertos y Santos, just celebrating life and death in the Latinx community. Today we have two awesome women and mothers kind of sharing with us kind of their insights and sort of their visions, I guess, and their journey in life. We have Nicoletta and we have Priscilla as well. I'll share a little bit about their bios, but I also wanted to take a moment to recognize that we are on Piscataway and Sasquatch Nation's land. Thank you. Uh, it's always weird to be the MC because there's usually somebody else reading people's bios and I'm just sitting there just listening. So bear with me. This is kind of my first time doing this. So I'll start off with me. I'm a Baltimore multimedia based art. I'm a multimedia artist based here in Baltimore. I create work that reflects my personal experience as an undocumented youth in the United States. Uh, I nurture the development of youth driven arts based leadership initiatives that illustrate how art and design thinking can assist in self expression and easing of cultural tensions. My practice highlights the beauty of being Mexican American, yet questions my national and cultural traditions. Like other Chicano artists, I challenge social norms to bring forth awareness of what it means to be Latino. Nicoletta Darita de la Brown is an award winning interdisciplinary artist and shaman who comes from a long line of healers. She is a Black Latinx, proud to be a first generation Panamanian born in the United States. Her artworks reconceive the life of an artist as thriving, nourishing herself and others during and through her art practice. She teaches mindfulness and art practice at Baltimore School of the Arts, former sculpture professor at Towson University, and former adjunct faculty in the MFA in Community Arts graduate program at Maryland Institute College of Art. Nicoletta's performances have been presented at the Phillips Collection, the Smithsonian, the Walters Art Museum. An exhibition of Nicoletta's film and video installation works have been presented at the Tribeca Film Festival and the Baltimore Museum of Art and at the Hyler Gallery and the Cardinal Gallery.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, bear with me. This is my first time. And then Priscila González de Doran is a native of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, has lived in Crofton, Maryland since 2020 as a journalist and multimedia producer. She focuses on Hispanic culture, immigration, and the Catholic faith. She has collaborated with the Catholic Review, Periódico de la Red, and El Sombrador Nuevo Evangelización. Her most popular articles include Dia de Dead, Express Faith, in which she addresses the Hispanic holiday Dia de los Muertos from the perspectives of two different cultures, American and Hispanic. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, we got that out of the way. I used to hate reading out loud. We were talking about it earlier. I was like, we were kind of mean when we were little. We had like popcorn reading and be like, we're going to choose the kid who sucks at reading. And that was me. So it's karma. Karma got me back today.
No, we support you. No.
You did it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So the main thing we're here today is we wanted to kind of talk about and share with you all a little bit about kind of our lives and how we celebrate not just like Dia de los Muertos, Dia de los Santos, or Dia de los Fieles Difuntos, but just how do we just exist as Latinos, Latinas, Latinx people here in Baltimore or here in Maryland, and how just the passing and the celebration of life is just a part of who we are and the way that we just care and give, right? So I just wanted to share with you all just a little bit about me and give you some context, and then Nicoletta will share a little bit, and then Priscilla will also share a little bit. So for me, where I'm coming at in this conversation, a lot of my work is just diving into altars and thinking about altars, and then thinking about my family and our relationship to land, place, and time, and the fact that for many generations we have lived and crossed the border in multiple different scenarios and situations and reasons. Most recently, I've been really fortunate to get a few residencies where I've been able to just focus on just developing work, which has been awesome and has been also great just to get paid to do that stuff, right?
Listen,
So yeah, so if there's some patrons out here, you got some extra money, throw it my way. And I've been really fortunate recently to receive a Ruby's Artist Grant, where I've been able to thank you,
congratulations.
where I've been able to travel to the border and to think about this. But prior to getting that grant, I've been working with the Walters for about 6 or 7 years, developing programmings for Dia de los Muertos. And we were talking, Priscilla, you asked me earlier, you're like, what's your favorite thing that you've done here, or what's your favorite experience or most memorable? And for me was when I was able to work with the Walters and go kind of behind the scenes and check out their collection. I remember they gave me this big old thick book, and it had like all of their Mesoamerican collection. And just randomly flipping through it, I came across this one piece. And this earthware is from Jalisco, where I'm from in Mexico, and I found it really particular because it like mimicked the exact like placement and like everything about me and my mom. So yeah, I just yeah. It takes me back every time I see this, and I also like to start my conversations just like with this image, just to also recognize kind of the power and the struggles that my mom has done, right, or has been through, to get me where I am today. Uh, but going back to thinking about traveling, a couple years ago, I created this piece called Chimalma, and Chimalma is about this goddess who guided, or the spirit that guided the Aztecs or the Mexica from what is now kind of the Arizona, Texas, New Mexico area to the city of Mexico. And it's really interesting just to think about Google Maps and what Google Map can document. And I was able to travel through and document uh, the border from the Mexican side facing towards the U.S. side, and also just digging into my own like multi-layeredness of my family and the complexities of my family. I was raised by a single mother for a really long time, and then I was also raised by a Salvadorian dad, stepdad, and just understanding like where he comes from and the complexities of being raised by by his grandmother, and just again thinking about land. And so going back to where I started the conversation earlier, thinking about getting money to travel and getting money to make art. Last January, I was able to travel to El Paso, Texas, and it was really, really moving. It was really interesting just to relive, in essence, trauma. Just remembering the fact that I had been in a space like this prior, undocumented, and now I could walk up to the wall and touch the wall. But it's also really interesting to be in an indigenous land and to be stopped by like tribal police and to ask me like what am I doing there. This particular place was part of the Tigua Pueblo, and just being in that space to take pictures like this. And I think why I chose to bring this up today is because when we think about Dia de los Muertos, we think about Dia de los Difuntos, Dia de los Santos. There's so many people whose lives continue to be lost just trying to make the journey to improve their lives, right? Um, and part of that travel, I was able. This is where my mind is. I was able to travel from El Paso all the way down to Big Bend National Park. And it's really interesting just to see the juxtaposition of being in what quote unquote a borderland and what a borderland looks like with fences and barbed wires and hyper policed area to seeing this. And again, that was so emotional just to be there and just to see that and just to see the fact that I could literally walk to Mexico and walk back and nobody would stop me in essence. And that's really informed my work now. I've been continuing to do altars to think about just celebrating the life of my family, our journeys, my privilege of being able to travel as well, and just thinking about our different dreams and just where we are, I guess. And Priscilla, you were asking me, you're like, are those all like your pictures? Like, how do you get them? I was like, yeah, they're my family. And I was like kind of timid about it. I was like, yeah, like it's complicated because it opens a lot of wounds, and it's my grandma knows every time I go to her house, like I'm gonna ask her to open up the drawer so I can look through the pictures. And then my family now is like, "Are you taking pictures because I'm gonna be in your artwork?" I was like, "Don't worry, no, I'm just documenting. I'm just documenting right now." Uh, but yeah, sometimes my family does end up in my artwork. This is one of my most recent pieces that's gotten a lot of traction. This was actually featured in the Washington Post, which is super exciting, a couple years ago. And for me, it's great to be sharing the space with you two because I admire mothers so much for all that they do for their children, and just thinking about just my grandmother, thinking about my mom, and then even thinking about my partner now, and just everything that you all do, right? And just wanted to take time to just hear from you all and invite you to kind of share a little bit about that, right? And then just thinking about uh, celebrating life. And unfortunately, part of celebrating life is also celebrating death, right? At least for me as a Mexican. Um, so where I wanted to leave off before I pass it out over to Nicoletta is just to think about death a little bit. A couple years ago, my grandfather also passed away, and circling back to Priscilla's question before we started the conversation, um, a formative moment for me going behind the scenes at the Walters was coming across urns and seeing the fact that the Walters in their collection had stuff that was so sacred to so many people, right? And seeing this urn, every time I see it, I'm like, oh, it's me. And like I can see my face there. But I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece, but it also reminds me of just like the complexities of like owning stuff and what it means to own things and to acquire things and to hold them in collections, and then what it means to like for only a handful of people to see him like in person. But this is, going back into the theme of Dia de los Muertos. This is an altar that we created for my grandfather during his funeral, and it was really beautiful. Just to like, even then, it was a learning moment for me because I was like, what is this like white cross that's here? And they're like, it's gala. I was like, oh, gala. I was like, oh, it's like a mineral. They're like, yeah, and like we use that mineral for like binding pigments for clothing. We also use that mineral for so we can eat tortillas, and there's like so many levels to that, which I think it's a perfect segue for Nicoletta to kind of start sharing a little bit about her practice, because I think that's where the overlap of our practice is, kind of the sacred rituals that we have, thinking about generational knowledge that we share with our family, so spoken and unspoken, and just the beauty of rituals. So I'm going to pass it over to Nicoletta for you to share a little bit about your practice and your work.
Well, first, I want to thank you for getting me completely in my whole feelings. You put me on the spot as a mother. My oldest child is right there. He just turned 18. And that moment, I was like, oh, did he just put it
Right.
right? Yeah. So thank you for that, for getting me back into my body, because this is sacred space. Yeah, we are on a stage. There are lights here. There are people with us. But this is what it's about. So for me, my practice is about honoring the women that came before me specifically, because they were often hidden in plain sight. And so the images that I have to share are of my great-grandmothers, my grandmother, and my mother. And these are all in Panama. And these are sacred things that I get to look at, but also I get to use as a way for me to create rituals, to honor them, to embody them, to invoke their magic, and to share the things that I learned from them that often no one saw. So this was a performance here at the Walters. It was a ritual bath performance. I had a beautiful conversation with the curator about what would happen if me as a Black woman, as a Black Latinx woman, bathed herself in public space. What would that look like? How can I take over the 15th century gallery? How can I take over altars that I wasn't allowed to touch? And how can I start a promenade, an ascension from outside of the building, and be kept safe, intentionally, on purpose? And so what you saw in the performance, because it was over the course of several days, and it was durational. So there were hours of me just having this moment, and people could approach and they would have a moment and they would cry or they would dance or they would laugh. And I was like, yeah. So that was something that happened here, and it was really special. And so this is another set of images that were happening in that gallery space. I put a lifeguard chair in there because I was guarding my own life in public space. And as a Black Latinx woman, I often feel invisible because I have to tell people that I am that. Because when you see me, you don't always know, well, you can't be two things. Actually, I am infinite. Catch up. So this was powerful for me because that altar behind me in that chair, I would go to when I was 15 at Baltimore School for the Arts, and I would sketch it. And now, as a goddess, I'm sitting in a chair as a throne and inviting others to honor themselves. And so what often happens in my practice, it starts as photography. So that image of me in a bath was the beginning of the series that ended up becoming a performance here at the Walters. And then it became a film that ended up at other spaces like the BMA and like spaces in DC. But that's my work, is this like kind of lovely building upon ritual, and how do I reshare and share again and share again and share again. And so right now, a body of work that I'm really passionate about is a series of headdresses that I am sculpting from flora, from flowers. I'm very connected to plant life. I practice plant medicine, but in every possible way. And so the fragility of a flower reminds me of the fragility of life, and that I must celebrate every moment. And so each of the headdresses in some way embody a woman in mi familia, a woman in my family, my aunts, my tias, my mother, my grandmother, and then I end up activating them in public space. So the image with the purple headdress was at the Hirshhorn Museum in DC. And so if we kind of keep going, we think about, well, when I'm in private space, these are moments where the rituals are happening for me. And this is a big deal for me to share, because I don't share these. Not because I'm unable to, but because I want to make sure people understand how sacred it is. And so these are also moments where altars show up in my home. Everything's an altar. And the images are images of women in my family, and we would sit around, me and my children. I have 4 children that came out of my whole body. I'm proud of that. And we will sit around and we will talk about the women in our family as a way of honoring them, the ones who are elders and the ancestors. And so I also activate public space, because when I feel unsafe, the first thing I'm going to do is render the space around me safe for myself and others. And then these are some examples of how altars show up for me. I create altars around nature, objects, and then also I place them in spaces as installation. So, yeah, I definitely want to share more, but I want Priscilla to share as well.
I think that also brought up earlier, we kind of had an unofficial pre-conversation before we started. So I think I had also shared that I'm moving, and I was surprised to start realizing like I do have like all these like mini little altars, and I'm like, oh, like I had this little spot for like, you know, think about this particular person or that person, and then now that I'm moving into my own new space, it's like, all right, I'm gonna put my grandfather's hat right here. I'm gonna put this particular plant right here facing it. But yeah, we'll dig a little bit deeper into that. You know, what do altars mean to us and how it looks, right? I'm gonna pass it on to Priscilla for a little bit, and if she's gonna share more on kind of her experience, also living here in Baltimore, the Maryland area, being involved with the Catholic Church as well, but not solely that, but giving us different perspectives as well. So I'm going to pass forward a little bit. So yeah, floor is yours.
Thank you, Edgar. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, just, our different backgrounds and yet how much we connect. I'm a journalist, so, I my piece is writing, and so it's a little hard to show that in images, but here are some images that show that, and I can talk more about that. Um, but I also want to thank you both for sharing your stories, because that's basically my practice. I ask questions and I get to know people, and then I tell their story, because there's so many of us out there that we would just have no idea if you wouldn't have shared, right? If you wouldn't have shared with us. So thank you for sharing your stories and being vulnerable. And especially Edgar, you show up at, crossing the border, and that's also, it's very dear to my heart, just all the Hispanic community here, that for the ones that were born here or came with privilege, is just uh, um, something that you have no idea. So giving them a voice, giving people a voice, is very important. So right here in this picture, this is actually November 2nd, and this is in Los Angeles. I have been in Baltimore for 2 years, but I have lived in the US for um, close to 8 years, or actually, if I think about it, maybe closer to 10 years. I was born and raised in Mexico, so I grew up with the traditional, Dia de los Muertos, Dia de los Fieles Difuntos, Dia de los Santos. And then here, as an immigrant, I came looking, for those celebrations. I questioned, what does it mean to be me? What's my identity? Because over there, we all do it and it's just what we do. But here is, people are not doing it. Why are we not celebrating? So over here in this picture, it's actually a church, very popular church in Los Angeles, La Placita Church. And it's a mix of, you can see the flags. I think over there it looks small, but over here looks bigger. You can see the mixture of flags, of all the immigrants that come here, all the different backgrounds. And faith, especially within the Catholic faith is very dear to a lot of Latin American um, or Latinx community, especially for the immigrants. And I just want to share a little bit the background. The background, it's a symbol, Our Lady of Guadalupe. It was a series of operations that took place in Mexico City, what we know right now, Mexico City, but it was Tepeyac back then, the hill of Tepeyac. And so she became a symbol for the indigenous people of back in 1931, that, we matter, indigenous people, we matter. And her skin is brown, it's a dark skin, and yet she's wearing royalty colors. That turquoise, Aztecs gods would wear it, and Aztec royalty kings. And so it's this mixture of, liberation in time of oppression, in the time of colonization. And throughout history, she's just been a symbol. She's been a symbol for the oppressed, and we see her here as a symbol for many immigrants from different countries. We can go next slide. Thank you. So I want to show with you how our Latin community celebrates Day of the Dead. And so particularly in the Catholic Church, this is in St. Clement and Lansom, and this is the community getting together, putting up an altar in the church, and just bringing their different aspects, their different backgrounds. And I want to share with you people, particularly immigrants, when they come to a new country and they just don't know anyone, they don't know anything, they come to the church because it's their safe spot, it's their safe place. And I can tell you, in Mexico, about 80% of the population, it's Catholic. So it's a big deal. We were talking another time, and it's, you can be Catholic by your beliefs, but it's also a cultural thing. And so it influenced our lifestyle. And again, I not long ago, I interviewed a woman from El Salvador, and she shared with her, my mother died, and she died yesterday, and I can't be there. And so what do? I just came to the church, and I just processed that grief. And so we can go next slide. This is another altar, also for particularly November 2nd, Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, Dia de los Fieles Difuntos. This is in St. Clair in Essex. And there's different aspects. You can see the different aspects of just the Catholic component. So you have the crucifix. You can also see the cempasúchil, the marigold flowers. And those were, in the past, with the pre-Hispanic civilizations, they were believed to guide the deceased to the altars. Right now in the Catholic Church, it's just used as a remembrance of that tradition, and is made in a cross because for the church, for the Catholic Church, the current tradition, it's a mix of pre-Hispanic traditions and traditions from the colonial era. Another interesting aspect is cemeteries. You might be know that, back in our countries, in Mexico particularly, because I'm a Mexican, I can speak of that. There's altars in the tombs. There's celebration. You go and you visit your deceased, and you bring food, and it's a way to process death. It's celebrating life, celebrating their life. And so when you can't go back there, you just go to the cemeteries here. And so the church does hold mass in the cemeteries. This is in Glen Burnie. And then Father Brito is in this picture. He's the one that I interviewed for that article that we were talking about, that you read in the description. So it's just a way to, just kind of become a new culture. You were talking about being a Chicano, and so it's coming a new culture. You have your culture from back then, and then it's a mix of different nationalities, different countries, but also it's a new evolving culture. Just as the culture is changing there, it's also changing here, and so these people represent that.
Yeah, and I guess when I moved to Northern Virginia, like DMV area, I remember like the Catholic Church became like a safe space for me and my mother. And it was interesting, like over the years, how the population, like I guess the church started relying more on the Spanish speaking mass to like
Yes.
stay alive in essence, because the populations were like lowering in numbers. And then I'm yet to experience, I don't remember as a child going to the cemeteries, but that's something that my family is preparing for, is for my grandfather's gravesite. Like you literally go out and like, I don't know if y'all remember that TV shows like Pimp My Ride. It's like literally that, but like the gravesite, like you go all out. Like you bring mariachi, you bring everything, right? Because you're there to spend quality time with them, right? And it's like literally like decking out the whole situation there, and like sleeping there, which I think, you say that out loud and people are like, wait, you sleep at the cemetery? Yeah, like you're there to have fun, have time, and be there with them, right, to guide their spirits. Did you have one more slide? I wanted to get into some questions. Yeah.
I think there's just one more
Okay.
slide.
Yeah.
And that's just sharing from my personal background. This is an altar my husband and we put up at our home, I believe 2 years ago. And, I actually didn't put much altars at my home back in Mexico, because there was always a community one. Growing up at class, each classroom had their own altar, and we would pick a celebrity who passed, Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, or someone, and you would just, go around it. So being here, it's like, oh, I want to honor also my grandfather passed, my husband's grandfather passed. So you'll see them in the picture. And I do want to say a couple things about the other aspects of the altar. And in relationship to the church, you'll see that there's 3 levels. Each one represents a different part of the church. So All Hallows Eve, October 31st, that represents the church militant. So it's the faithful, the devoted, that go to mass and go to church. And then the next level represents November 1st, All Saints Day. So the ones that are in heaven with God, and that represents the triumphant church. And then the last one is November 2nd, the Día de los Muertos, or Fieles Difuntos, and they are the ones that represent the penitential church. So in that way to heaven. Uh, Something I want to say is pan de muerto. It's pan dulce that it's made particularly for these holidays. Dia de Muertos, and it's delicious. It's sugary. It has a little bit of orange, and it's very much also representing communities. So if you go to Latin panaderia, you'll see these all over during these dates. Again, the pictures represent, making in the Catholic Church, you remember them, you pray for them, and then you have what food do they used to like? And so, in pre-Hispanic civilizations, you believe that many believe that life ended with death. And after the colonial era, once the Spaniards came and evangelized with the Catholic Church, life didn't quite end with death. Death became a bridge to eternal life. And so in many countries, things are celebrated differently, but you're no longer afraid of death. We could say that it's a process to grieve, but it's also a process of joy. And so I can talk forever, but we can get into those questions.
No. I think this is perfect. I think, we're both Mexican, so we can share a lot about like kind of the mainstream, I think, of when we think of Dia de los Muertos. But I think it's important when we start thinking about just death and celebrating death. It's like, it's not monolithic. Like Dia de los Muertos is not just one like thing, right? There's so many ways to celebrate it. So I prepared some questions. I'm gonna reread again. We'll see how it goes. But I want to stay with the theme of food. I think food is really important. For me, food is sacred. It's created with generations of knowledge and wisdom. During Dia de los Muertos, my family will put out in their offerings food to guide those who have passed away to come back and visit and to spend time with us, in essence, right? That smell, right? In essence, like we don't eat the food that we put out there, right? Because the spirit came through and took the nourishment with them. So, what's your favorite meal, and how did it become so significant to you as like your favorite meal? I'll go first, so give you some time because I'm kind of hungry too. So, I love mole. Chicken mole is my favorite. My mom used to always make like enchiladas with like mole sauce on it. And part of my art practice, I've been able to travel, and hence my conversation earlier, like use other people's money to travel. It's great.
Listen.
Yeah, it's great. All right. Again, if there's somebody out there who wants to, all right, I'm here. But I got to visit Oaxaca, and Oaxaca has, depending on the region, has so many varieties of mole, and I just fell in love with it even more so. So they didn't pay me to say this, but there's a really awesome place here in Baltimore, Taquito Mexicano. It's my favorite. The chicken mole there, it's great. And
when are we
so
going?
we later
After this, okay.
after this. So when I pass away, I think my family will have chicken enchilada mole there for me. So yeah. So what are your favorites and why?
I'm just kind of upset that you went first now because
Yeah.
mole is also my favorite.
Okay.
It's just delicious, and yeah, we celebrate a little different. I remember in school we would actually eat the food, and it's totally valid. Everyone celebrates.
For kids, it's
their own-
fine. Like I think
their
as kids,
favorite.
we can break all the rules, right? But
Yeah,
yeah.
well, almost. But yeah, mole, just the smell, and yeah, there's so many kinds, but it's really a treat, mole. And then I kind of said, pan de muerto, it's just something about sharing with people, it's just conversation, and just the food just takes you back to that conversation and that
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, and then mole for me also has a relationship with tamales because we like stuff tamales with anything and everything, but mole is one of the big things. It's one of my favorite memories is like my grandma was supposed to make tamales for us. We had like everybody. My grandma has like, she's so lucky. She has like close to like 30 grandchildren and she's met all of them. And then she has like 14 great grandchildren and she's met all of them. And she's still thriving. Like this is her single life now. She's like a single lady now and going to dances and stuff. But we got her mad one time before like a a family gathering, and she made the tamales so spicy. But it's a memorable like memory. Like I love that memory, like that mole, right? Yeah, yeah. Nicoletta, how about for you? What's your favorite food or your
Okay, so
favorite
I'm
meal?
Panamanian.
Yeah.
Hi. For me, it's yuca and bacalao.
Okay.
So for me, the yuca, just having that moment, my grandmother would send me to the bodega,
Yeah.
and I'd have to go and get the yuca, and then we would like take the bacalao. We would like, we would soak it, and it was just a whole moment. And for me, that whole ritual was everything. That was more magical than eating it. And so whenever I want to bring her back, because my grandmother is no longer here in body, um, yuca and bacalao. And I wanted to go back to one of the slides
Yeah.
too to talk about also oranges are like a really big thing for me because she would send me to, like I said, the bodega and get the yuca, the bacalao, and I would get oranges and other things. But this was really significant, and this is a thing a ritual that I do all the time. This is basically tonic water. So we would always have in the fridge these tonics, and they were magical. So the image on the left is my grandmother's fridge. That image is powerful for me.
I wasn't
because
sure if that was it.
That's
because
her
I was looking
fridge.
through the slides. I was like, is that really?
That's hers. So I would stare at it because it was magic, and we would drink it, and it's that cilantro, and it's just like in the water, and you would drink a little bit every day. And then the other image is mine. That's my tonic. And so whenever I want to call her in, I will make it, but also it's just beautiful in my refrigerator, and it's great for me. Like it's wonderful for my body. It's also about me connecting with her, but it's something that my kids now, they're like, the tonic, I'm making mine. I'm like, okay, but don't touch that one, as mine. Like that is the thing. So for me, it's the yuca, the bacalao, and the tonic.
That's making me want to go back to my grandfather's farm. There's a place where it's a natural like spring, and like we would fight over who would get to like take some home in essence, like because they would come with jugs full of this like water. So I think that might be a new tradition for me to go back to his farm and gather some water. Thinking about traditions, what's a tradition that you all hope to pass down to your children? I don't have children, so yeah.
So you can't
I
answer?
can't really answer it. Yeah, yeah.
But you can also, say what you want to pass on to the
Maybe, yeah.
community.
Yeah, yeah.
And so something very dear to my heart is we would write these poems on the Dia de los Muertos, or coming to the date, and it will be about La Catrina came, and La Catrina, this dead lady, she would take someone, she came in to take Priscilla, but she couldn't take Priscilla because X, Y, and Z. And so it's just like a rhyme, and it was just like a game. It was just fun. And so as a writer, I think that'll be something fun that I look forward to just write with my son, and just, and set up the altar. And, he is 5 months, and he just looks at pictures and stares at pictures, gets the colors. But I realize how important it is to have our families' pictures, for the ones that are not longer here, the ones that live far away, and for them to be connected with them and being familiar with them.
Yeah, pictures are important. I totally agree. Something that came up, because I'm always digging into pictures. My family hadn't seen my great grandfather's photograph in years. And when I asked for it, people started digging through, and they finally found it. And I'm like a mirror image of him. It is scary. It is scary. Yeah, yeah. Like I literally look just like him, which is insane. But yeah, I think that's important. And in Mexico, we just poke fun of death. Like it's like, yeah.
Totally.
So I'm imagining kids just like making up all sorts of ridiculous stories with that. How about for you? What's a tradition that you hope to pass down?
It's similar. Like with my children, we will lay out images of people that, they'll look at images of their grandmother, and they're like, she used to look like that. I'm like, yeah, she was body, yaddy, yaddy. Listen. And then even if you go, there's a slide I want to show where we were looking at images the other day. Go back. No. To keep going, the end of mine.
Oh, the end of
Yeah.
yours. So this way.
Yeah. Just this moment, because I went to Catholic school.
Yeah.
And so even preparing for this, I was taking out images of me. And my daughter was like, "That's my face." And I was like, "It is, because I'm your mom." And so it was this conversation about, growing up, going to Catholic school. They did not have that experience.
Yeah.
But it was a big part of my life. And so that dress, I still have it. So it became this moment of them looking back at themselves and then looking forward and then looking back. So having these moments where we're looking at images of ourselves, celebrating, right? When we look at images of people that have passed, we're celebrating. Of course, there's sadness because we miss them, but then we think about, well, how does she dance? And I'm like, let me put on some Celia Cruz.
Yeah.
And let me show you. So that's the thing for me, is I really hope that my children celebrate themselves in every aspect of life.
Yeah.
And document it. And then also we'll look back at all of those people that made an impression and have that kind of moment that we have. That's what I hope.
Yeah, I have a question just for you. Yeah, just for you. Just thinking about it. We had we were prepping for this. We were on Zoom, and I was like, I had a friend who was from Panama, and this whole time, and it wasn't until I met her grandmother, I didn't realize like she was Black, and I was like, it never like dawned on me, right? So, a question for you is like just thinking about like the African diaspora and how it's influenced and created like many distinct hybrid like celebrations and cultures all throughout the world, right? Not just here in the Americas. What are some parallels that you've noticed and like how like Black Americans and Afro Latinx communities just celebrate the passing of loved ones?
Yeah, so I love that question. Thank you for asking it, for sure. Because my people came from West Africa to Jamaica to Panama to the United States.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff we carried. And there's a lot of things that when I see an altar that's not from my culture, I understand it from the coding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have to speak that specific language. So let's be super clear that English should not be my language. Spanish should not be my language. Yep. I don't know what my language should be, but it is not any of that. So when I see an altar that's not mine, I already understand what it's supposed to be. And often a lot of the things that happen were these rituals that were kind of a fusion between the Catholicism and then also ancestral information that traveled with us. And so for me, what I've noticed is that there's this way of like, during passing, like when my grandfather passed away, we lit a candle and we had this altar set up and we kept that light lit for a week. We would replace the candle and we would light it from one candle to the next. So all night, someone would take a moment and we would dance by it. We would cry, we would play games, we would eat, we would leave offerings there. And so all of that, what I've noticed is that no matter where we come from as Black people, we've brought a lot of stuff with us. And we've picked up a lot of things along the way. So one thing too, because I am Latinx, I'm holding information from the whole journey that my people came to get here. And so what I love about that is having conversations about how I don't have to decide. I'm doing it all.
Yeah. I think, and I grew up in Northern Virginia, and it was just really interesting. Like going back to my friend, like it'd be like 6 different countries. It was like the United Nations or something, every party. But we would all be like our lived experiences were amazing. The fact that we as kids could be kids and we could, maybe we spoke different dialects, but we all knew what a smile was, right? And we knew, thinking about altars. I had the privilege of, nobody paid for this, I paid it myself. I went to Cuba, and it was the first time I ever saw like Blackness as not seen as other. And that was so beautiful, and just to see people practicing Santeria in such an unapologetic way, it was gorgeous. And I could just connect, even though I didn't practice it or had never experienced it. I just felt so spiritually connected to the openness of people just wearing white for a whole year, right? And like I was just like, wow.
Can I say something? Because you moved me. You said this was the first time you saw Black as not other.
Yeah, not other.
Right, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I need to say that out loud because it's my truth right now.
Yeah.
I look forward to moments when I'm not other.
Yeah.
When I'm not having to define and redefine and quantify and qualify and label and unlabel and readdress everything. So I want to say that because we are in a moment right now in this country, in this world, where we are really deconstructing and reconstructing. That's why this is happening today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we were having earlier where we were saying like, it's beautiful to have these conversations, but we don't have to have these conversations just at this time, at this moment, right? These conversations can happen randomly in August. It doesn't have to relate to a particular holiday. I want to open it up for questions from people who are here, if that's okay with you all. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We got about like 9 minutes left. Yeah. So people have questions for us.
Hi, I want to thank you, all three of you, for being here and sharing so much of yourselves with us today. I have been thinking a lot about smell, and I was just with my 88-year-old mother, and I'm gonna cry. We lost my brother in May.
No, we're gonna pause. No, we're gonna pause.
And I walked in to our house, and it was like he was there because it smelled like us. And we're not even in the same house anymore. So what I wanted to do is ask you about smell. I'm from California, and so those areas that you went to, the power of that smell of the chaparral and the water and the dust, it's unique in that part of the world. And then also, when you were talking about the altars and the churches have an incredible smell. So I wanted to ask you all about how smell carries with you in your practice and how you think about the kind of olfactory sense in your practice. Sorry, and thank you for letting me cry.
Did you apologize?
You don't need,
Not today.
Thank you for sharing and for being vulnerable with us.
Yeah, this is exactly what we wanted. We want this to be like an open, honest conversation where we want to be vulnerable with you. And, thank you so much. Yeah. That's a hard question, but for...
No, I have.
I
it's
have
not a hard question for me.
I have it.
You good?
So, wet dirt after like a hot summer day. That's my favorite smell. And that just reminds me of just the first time being able to go back to Mexico and spend time with my family. That's what it reminds me of. Yeah.
For me, it's always burning offerings. So whether it's sage, if it's Palo Santo, if it's any other herb, like when I smell that burning, I know that someone is there with me, whether it's my aunt or my grandmother or my grandfather. And my children also have identified it too. They're like, oh, mom is happy right now because it's that scent. Or we need to hug her more because it's that smell. Yeah. So burning offerings.
Yeah.
I associate smells with time and places. So, and it's funny you bring it up because we usually think of pictures rather than smells, but I think it's just as important many times. Like for instance, my mom came and visit and she left the sweater and she was gone and I smelled it and I was like, these smells like home back in Mexico. And when I think for, I don't know, 2010, something that happened and I remember that smell. I remember, I connect the smells of something that was happening at that time. And it's just, I smell and I just go back to that memory. And I think it's beautiful to embrace, smells and memories.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you for that.
Anyone else have questions for us?
I have a question. or a comment. Right here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hi. I just want to say that Nicoletta, like I just love your spirit. Like I watched like a few of your videos, and then I saw this event, and I was like, wow. But it really made me emotional, and yeah, I'm just grateful for your existence, and I just wanted to tell you that. Thank you.
What is your name?
Shauna.
Shauna. I appreciate you.
Yeah,
I appreciate you seeing me. I see you, and I want to connect after this
Okay.
because that's what this is for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we had a question up here.
So my question, when you guys were talking about scents earlier as well, was that triggered a question, and then you asked about smell. So often, I'm trying to formulate the question, but in connecting with people who are no longer here in body with us, it's often thought to maybe through different senses. And so whether that is sound or smell or other things. So just wondering maybe if we can elaborate on the senses, if there's other things from a music, or we talked about taste, we talked about smell. So anything else you can think of in that realm?
My mom always jokes around that I was born an old man. I don't know how to take it sometimes.
You take that as a
I
compliment.
guess a compliment. And music. I'm not a vinyl record snob, but like the crackling sound of vinyl, especially like norteños. Norteños, if you're not familiar with it, means like northern music from Texas. It was really influenced by Polish music, so like polkas. So an old record crackling, playing polka music, like that just brings me to like a happy place. So I catch myself, I'm like, oh gosh, I am that old person. Like I'll be like driving down 95, sitting in traffic. I was like, all right, I'm not feeling this. Put on Spotify, or when I come home, and if I'm having to clean, now I'm that person. So if I have a child, I think they're gonna be like, yeah, dad's ready to start cleaning, or he's like trying to get in a good mood. Yeah. But yeah, old crackling
That
polka music. Yeah.
For me, it's movement. Whenever I want to feel connected, I move my body. It's connected to music, of course, but I don't need that. I'll dance to the wind. Me and the tree will have a whole moment. The river, don't get me started, but do ask me.
Do you have a favorite tree here in Baltimore?
I do.
Where is it? What is it?
It's in Sykesville.
One of my favorite ones is in Patterson Park. There's this willow tree that's right in front of the Pulaski like sculpture situation there.
I would
Yeah.
like to be introduced to your tree.
I'll show you.
Would you allow me to dance with your
Yeah,
tree?
Yeah.
So for me, yeah, that's whenever I am either grieving or celebrating, the body tells the story first and foremost. And it also is about touch, about adornment, right? It's like what I put on my body. So it's definitely that sensory touch for me.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm still looking out for a tree in Baltimore.
Oh.
My favorite one is still back at home in Mexico. It's just holding a rock. It was really, really interesting. But I'm looking out, so if anyone knows about a tree, I'll
give you.
appreciate
Yeah, there's some good ones. There's some good ginkgo
I
trees.
feel like that's a field trip. Look at
Yeah.
people outside like, there they go, looking for trees.
Yeah, on that note, let's talk some more about trees and about celebrating life. And thank you all so much for making time to join us this Thursday evening. Y'all have a wonderful night.
Thank you.